Good morning, everyone. Let me tell you something. Most people fear loneliness like it's some kind of disease. They run from it, they numb themselves, they surround themselves with noise, distractions, and people who don't even push them forward. But here's the truth. Most won't tell you. Loneliness is a blessing. It's the fire that forges warriors. When you're alone, there are no excuses, no fake friends, no outside validation, no one to tell you how great you are when you haven't even scratched the surface of your potential. When you sit in that silence, when it's just you versus you, that's where the real growth happens. That's where the weak break and the strong rise. People fear being alone because they're afraid of facing the truth. Their weaknesses, their regrets, their demons. But that's exactly where you need to be. You can't outrun yourself forever. The only way to truly level up in life is to embrace the grind of solitude and use it as a weapon. Loneliness strips away the fake. It forces you to confront who you really are, not who you pretend to be for the world. And if you can sit in that darkness, if you can endure that silence, if you can learn to love your own company, you become unstoppable. Every great warrior, every legend, every game changer spent time in isolation, grinding in the shadows while the rest of the world slept. They didn't need validation. They didn't need people clapping for them. They built themselves in the trenches of solitude. So stop running from loneliness. Sit in it. Embrace it. Let it break you. Then rebuild yourself stronger. Because when you come out of that fire, when you learn to rely on yourself and no one else, nothing and no one can shake you. Loneliness isn't a curse, it's a gift. And if you use it right, it will turn you into a beast. Loneliness is a mirror. It doesn't lie, it doesn't flatter, and it sure as hell doesn't care about your ego. When you strip away the noise of the world, the constant distractions, the opinions of others, the endless scrolling through fake lives online, you're left with nothing but yourself. And for most people, that's terrifying. Because when you're alone, there's no one to validate you, no one to pretend for, no masks to wear. It's just you. But that's where the truth lives. Loneliness reflects back everything you've been avoiding. All your regrets, your insecurities, your failures, they stare right at you. That's why people run from it. They fill their days with endless chatter, meaningless conversations, and temporary highs just to avoid that reflection. But the problem is, the more you run, the further you get from who you really are. Loneliness isn't your enemy, it's your teacher. And if you're willing to face it, it will show you exactly what you need to work on. Think about it. Every time you're alone, the thoughts you push down start to rise. That voice in your head, the one that questions if you're doing enough, if you're strong enough, if you're truly living the life you're meant to live, it gets louder. And that's good, because that voice isn't your enemy, it's your truth. Most people drown it out because the truth is uncomfortable. But growth doesn't happen in comfort. It happens when you stare into that mirror of loneliness and refuse to look away. In that stillness, you'll see your weaknesses. You'll see where you've been cutting corners, making excuses, and avoiding the hard work. It will show you the times you let fear win, the times you settled for less, the moments you knew you could have pushed harder but didn't. And that's painful. But pain is a powerful teacher. Most people waste it, but if you lean into it, pain becomes your fuel. Loneliness isn't there to break you, it's there to reveal you. Every great leader, every warrior, every unstoppable force that changed the world, they knew the power of solitude. They understood that to become more, they had to strip away everything that wasn't serving them. No one becomes great in a crowd. Greatness is built in the shadows, in those moments when it's just you, your thoughts, and your will to keep going. The mirror of loneliness doesn't just show you your flaws, it also reflects your strength. It shows you every time you push through when you didn't think you could. It shows you the resilience that's been buried beneath the surface, waiting to be unleashed. But you can't see that strength if you're too afraid to look. Facing yourself means owning your story, the good, the bad, the brutal truths that most people hide from. But when you do that, something incredible happens. You stop fearing loneliness. Instead of seeing it as a punishment, you start to see it as a privilege. Because in that solitude, you get clarity. The noise of the world fades away, and what remains is what truly matters. Your purpose, your drive, your reasons for pushing forward when everything in you wants to quit. Loneliness strips away the superficial and leaves you with what's real. And here's the thing, the more you face that mirror, the stronger you become. You stop relying on others to define your worth. You don't need external validation to feel complete because you've built something unshakable within yourself. You've faced your demons, acknowledged your flaws, and decided that none of it will define you. That's real strength. That's the kind of power that no one can take from you. Most people will never get there. They'll keep running from loneliness, pretending they're happy in a crowd, convincing themselves that constant noise means they're alive. But deep down, they'll always know something's missing. They'll feel that emptiness every time the crowd leaves, every time the noise dies down. But not you. You won't feel empty because you did the work. You faced the mirror and you built yourself from the inside out. So the next time loneliness comes knocking, don't slam the door, open it. Sit with it. Let it show you what you need to see. Because in that reflection is everything you need to become unstoppable. Silence builds strength. It's not the kind of strength you get from lifting weights or running miles. It's something deeper. The kind of strength that comes from knowing who you are when no one is watching. In a world where people crave noise and distraction, silence becomes your advantage. Most people can't handle it. They reach for their phones, turn on the TV, or surround themselves with chatter, anything to drown out the quiet. But those who seek strength don't run from silence, they run to it. When you strip away the noise, something shifts. You're forced to listen to your thoughts. Every insecurity, every fear, every regret rises to the surface. There's no escape. That's why people avoid silence. They don't want to hear the voice that reminds them of the goals they gave up on, the promises they broke to themselves, or the habits that are holding them back. But that voice, that's the truth. It's your gut telling you exactly where you need to grow. Only in silence can you hear it clearly. It's uncomfortable, growth always is, but if you can sit in that discomfort and refuse to run, you'll find something powerful. You'll find resilience. When you stop silencing your thoughts and start confronting them, you gain control. You realize that the fear, the doubt, the shame, they're just thoughts. They have no power unless you give it to them. In that silence, you can challenge those thoughts. You can break them down. And once you do that, you're free. Strength doesn't come from avoiding pain. It comes from standing in it. Most people want comfort. They want reassurance, validation, and distractions to keep them from facing what hurts. But real strength, it's built in those moments when it's just you and your thoughts, and you decide to face them head on. That's where you become unshakable. Think about it. Every time you step into silence, you're stepping into a battlefield. But it's not a fight against the world. It's a fight against yourself. And that's the hardest fight there is. Because your mind will throw everything it can at you. It'll remind you of every failure. It'll tell you that you're not good enough, that you'll never reach your goals, that you should just quit. But when you stand your ground in that silence, when you refuse to back down, you weaken that voice. Every time you do it, you take back control. The strongest people aren't the ones who have never struggled. They're the ones who have stood in the face of their struggles and refused to break. And that strength is earned. You can't buy it. You can't fake it. It's built through every moment of silence you endure. Every time you sit with your thoughts instead of drowning them out, you're getting stronger. Every time you choose reflection over distraction, you're sharpening your mind. And that kind of strength is rare because it requires discipline. It's easy to surround yourself with noise. It's easy to keep moving, keep busy, keep pretending that everything's fine. But it takes real courage to stop. To sit in that stillness and say, I'm ready to face whatever comes. Most won't do it. They'll avoid it their whole lives, choosing comfort over growth. But you're not like most people. You wouldn't be here if you were. In that silence, you'll discover things about yourself that no amount of noise could ever show you. You'll see your weaknesses, yes, but you'll also see your strength. You'll remember every time you push through when it would have been easier to quit. You'll hear the voice that tells you to keep going, even when no one's cheering you on. That's your inner strength. And once you tap into it, nothing can stop you. But silence isn't a one-time thing. It's not something you face once and then move on. It's a practice. Every day you have to be willing to step away from the noise and confront yourself. Some days will be harder than others. Some days your mind will try to pull you back into comfort. It'll whisper that you've done enough, that you deserve a break, that facing yourself isn't worth it. That's when you push even harder, because every time you choose silence over distraction, you're proving to yourself that you're in control. You're proving that your mind doesn't own you. You own it. And that's a level of strength that most people will never know. The world rewards noise. It rewards those who seek attention, who chase approval, who constantly need validation. But none of that leads to true strength. True strength is quiet. It's built in the moments no one sees. And the best part, once you've built that strength, no one can take it from you, because it's not based on external factors. It's not about how many followers you have, how much praise you received, or how many people tell you you're doing great. It's about knowing deep down that you've faced yourself and you've won. And every time you step into that silence again, you'll win again. The world will always try to pull you back into the noise. It'll tell you that you need to stay busy, stay connected, stay entertained. But you'll know better. You'll know that the real power lies in the quiet. And every time you choose it, you're choosing growth. You're choosing strength. You're choosing to become unstoppable. No validation needed. That's a truth most people can't accept. They spend their lives chasing approval, bending to expectations, and waiting for someone else to tell them they're good enough. Every move they make is calculated. Every action designed to impress. They post for likes, speak for applause, and live for the approval of others. But that's not strength. That's weakness wrapped in validation. True strength comes when you stop needing anyone to clap for you. When you rely on validation, you give your power away. You hand control of your self-worth to people who barely know you. People who judge you based on surface-level glimpses of your life. And what happens when the applause stops? What happens when the likes fade and the compliments dry up? Most people crumble because they never built a foundation within themselves. They live for approval instead of purpose. But the ones who don't need validation, they're different. They move in silence. They work when no one's watching. They grind in the shadows, not because they're chasing recognition, but because they're chasing growth. They understand that external praise is fleeting. One day people cheer for you, the next day they forget your name. If your strength is built on validation, you'll spend your life trying to prove yourself to people who don't even matter. The problem is most people are terrified of being unseen. They confuse visibility with value. They think that if people aren't noticing their progress, it doesn't count. But real progress, it happens when no one's looking. The hardest battles are fought alone. The moments when you want to quit, when the weight feels unbearable, when there's no one there to encourage you, that's where the real work happens. And if you're only working for validation, you'll break. Because validation doesn't carry you through the dark. Purpose does. When you stop needing validation, everything changes. You move differently. You're no longer held hostage by opinions. You don't second guess yourself based on what others might think. You trust yourself. You follow your own path even if no one understands it. And that kind of freedom, it's rare. Most people are shackled by the fear of rejection. They hold back, they play small. They sacrifice their potential just to stay liked. But the truth is, the more you grow, the less validation you'll get. People aren't comfortable with growth. When you start leveling up, when you stop fitting into the version of yourself they're used to, they'll resist it. They'll question you, doubt you, even mock you. And if you're chasing validation, that's when you'll fold. But if you built yourself without it, none of that will matter. You'll keep moving. You'll keep growing because you understand that validation is a byproduct, not the goal. You don't owe the world an explanation for your growth. You don't need to prove your worth to anyone. The work you do in silence, the progress no one claps for, the days when you push through without recognition, that's what builds real strength. And when you get to the top, people will call you lucky. They'll act like success came overnight because they didn't see the nights you grinded alone. They didn't see the sacrifices. They didn't see the doubts you overcame. But you'll know. And that's all that matters. When you free yourself from validation, you also free yourself from comparison. That's the trap most people fall into. They scroll through highlights of other people's lives, measuring their worth against curated moments. They convince themselves they're behind, that they're not doing enough. But that's the lie validation feeds. It makes you chase what isn't even real. Because the truth is, most people are performing. They post their victories, not their struggles. They show their success, not the failures that came before it. And if you're basing your self-worth on that illusion, you'll never feel like enough. But when you stop seeking validation, you stop comparing. You realize the only competition is the person you were yesterday. Every step forward, no matter how small, becomes a win. You stop caring if people notice because you know. You see the discipline, the resilience, the growth. And that's what fuels you. Another thing about validation, it's addictive. The more you get it, the more you need it. It's like a drug. One compliment turns into craving 10. One achievement isn't enough unless people praise it. And before you know it, your worth is entirely dependent on the opinions of others. But opinions are fickle. People's perception of you will change based on their own insecurities, their own projections. If you're chasing that, you'll never find peace. But when you break free from that addiction, you become unstoppable. You no longer care if people understand your vision. You don't need their applause to keep going. You know why you're doing what you're doing. You're not chasing approval. You're chasing mastery. Every setback becomes a lesson. Every win is for you, not for the world to see. And the best part, when you reach your goals, the fulfillment is real. Because it wasn't built on external praise. It was built on internal strength. There's nothing wrong with people acknowledging your progress. There's nothing wrong with a little encouragement along the way, but the key is this. It can't be your fuel. Validation should be a byproduct, not the engine. Your drive has to come from within. That's the difference between those who keep going and those who quit. The ones who rely on validation burn out the moment it's gone. The ones who are fueled by purpose, they keep pushing no matter what. And make no mistake, people will question you. They'll wonder why you're working so hard when no one's watching. They'll tell you to slow down, to enjoy life, to stop being so intense. But they're saying that because they don't understand. They don't know what it's like to be driven by something deeper. And it's okay. You're not here to be understood. You're here to grow. Validation is temporary. It fades. But the strength you build when no one is watching, that lasts forever. And once you taste that kind of freedom, you'll never chase approval again. The shadow grind. That's where the real work happens. Not under the bright lights, not in front of cheering crowds, but in the dark. It's the work no one sees. The sweat, the tears, the hours that blur into days while the world goes on unaware. Most people will never understand the shadow grind. They only see the results. They see the wins, the success, the so-called overnight accomplishments. But what they don't see are the countless hours of sacrifice that built it. And that's exactly why so few people ever get there. They're unwilling to live in the shadows. When you commit to the grind, there are no shortcuts. There's no applause, no likes, no validation. It's just you and the work. And that's why it's so damn powerful, because the shadows don't care who you think you are. They don't care about your excuses or how tired you are. They don't care about your past or the stories you tell yourself. In the shadows, none of that matters. What matters is whether or not you show up day after day. No fanfare, no recognition, just work. Most people can't handle that. They crave the spotlight. They want immediate results, instant praise, proof that they're doing it right. But the grind doesn't offer that. In fact, it often feels like the opposite. You'll put in the hours and there will be no visible progress. You'll fail and no one will be there to pick you up. You'll question yourself every step of the way, wondering if all this effort is even worth it. And that's exactly why the shadows are necessary. They separate the committed from the comfortable. The weak tap out when the results don't come fast enough. The strong, they stay. The shadows are where you build resilience. Every time you push through the doubt, the exhaustion, the loneliness, you grow. Every rep, every late night, every early morning, every sacrifice, they stack. You may not see it at first, but the foundation is being built. And by the time the world finally takes notice, it's already too late. You become something unstoppable. Because the version of you that survived the shadows is not the same one that started. But don't think for a second that the grind will ever get easier. It won't. In fact, the further you go, the harder it gets. Success doesn't mean the shadows disappear. It means the stakes get higher, the pressure grows, and the weight of your choices becomes heavier. But the difference is by then, you'll be built for it. You won't need the applause to keep going. You won't rely on recognition to fuel you because you've already spent years working without it. And once you've tasted that kind of self-reliance, nothing can shake you. The people who avoid the shadows never develop that strength. They chase the illusion of success, the titles, the money, the admiration, without understanding what it really takes. And even if they manage to reach some version of success, it's fragile because they never built the mental and emotional toughness that only the shadows can provide. The first setback, the first failure, the first taste of rejection, it breaks them. But for those who've lived in the shadows, failure is just part of the process. They failed so many times in silence that it no longer scares them. It fuels them. And that's the thing most people miss. The grind isn't about proving others wrong. It's not about flexing your achievements or silencing your doubters. That's surface level motivation, and it fades fast. The real reason you stay in the shadows is to prove something to yourself. Every hour you spend pushing when no one's watching is a reminder that you are relentless. Every setback you overcome is proof that you are stronger than your circumstances. Every moment you choose discipline over comfort is a step closer to the version of yourself you were meant to become. But here's the kicker. The shadows will test you. They'll whisper every doubt you've ever had. They'll convince you that your progress is meaningless, that no one cares, that maybe you should just stop. And most people will listen. Most people will quit, telling themselves the lie that it wasn't meant to be. But those who don't quit, they develop something unbreakable. That's why the shadow grind is a gift. It forces you to strip away the external motivation and find the internal fire. You learn to rely on yourself. You stop waiting for opportunities and start creating them. You stop worrying about who's watching and focus solely on the work. And when you finally step out of those shadows, the world won't be ready. They'll see the result, but they won't understand the process. And that's fine. They don't need to. The people who chase the spotlight will never know the strength that comes from grinding in the dark. They'll never experience the pride of knowing they showed up when no one else would. They won't understand what it means to stay disciplined when every part of you wants to quit. But you will, because you've been there. You felt the weight of the shadows, and instead of running from it, you stood tall. And once you've built that level of resilience, you don't fear the shadows anymore. You welcome them, because you know that's where the next version of you is waiting to be built. And while the world continues chasing shortcuts and validation, you'll be right there in the shadows, doing what needs to be done. Pain is the ultimate teacher. It doesn't care about your comfort. It's not concerned with your excuses. Pain exists to break you down and see what you're made of. Most people run from it. They avoid it like a plague, choosing the path of least resistance because it's easier. But the truth is, everything you want, every ounce of strength, every shred of growth, every piece of the person you're trying to become lives on the other side of pain. You can't fake your way through it. You can't skip it. Pain will find you, and when it does, you have a choice. Run like most people or stand your ground and face it. The problem is that we live in a world that's conditioned people to believe pain is the enemy. Society has done everything it can to shield people from it. Comfort is marketed like a drug, and people willingly take the bait. They choose temporary pleasure over long-term growth. But the ones who understand the power of pain don't see it as something to be avoided. They see it as a doorway. Pain strips away the lies. It forces you to see yourself as you truly are. There's no hiding in pain, no mask to wear. It exposes your weaknesses, your doubts, and your fears. But it also reveals something most people never get to see: the depths of your own resilience. When pain hits, it doesn't ask for permission. It doesn't wait until you're ready. It shows up unannounced and demands to know who you really are. And most people, they crumble. They let the weight of it crush them because they were never prepared to face it. They built their lives on comfort, and when the storm came, their foundation gave way. But the ones who train for it, who willingly put themselves in situations that test their limits, they don't break. They bend, they adapt, they endure. And every time they face pain and survive, they come out harder, sharper, and more dangerous. Pain is the price of growth. Every great achievement, every victory worth earning has pain in its DNA. The athletes who stand on podiums didn't get there because they avoided suffering. They got there because they embraced it. They showed up when their bodies begged them to stop. They kept pushing through the soreness, the exhaustion, the injuries. They understood that pain wasn't a signal to quit. It was a sign they were moving in the right direction. And that's the same for anyone chasing greatness. But pain isn't just physical. The mental and emotional toll of chasing your goals will break most people long before their bodies give out. The self-doubt, the failures, the criticism, they hit harder than any physical blow ever could. And this is where people fall apart. They let the pain of rejection stop them. They let the fear of failing paralyze them. But the ones who succeed know that pain is temporary. Failure is temporary. The sting of embarrassment, the frustration of setbacks, none of it lasts. What lasts is the person you become when you refuse to quit. Every time you push through pain, you're rewriting your story. You're proving to yourself that you're stronger than your circumstances. The voice in your head that tells you to stop, it gets quieter. The doubts that once held you back lose their grip. And eventually you realize that pain wasn't your enemy, it was your catalyst. It sharpened you. It revealed your grit. And it forced you to rise to a level you never would have reached without it. But make no mistake, the world will try to convince you otherwise. It will tell you that pain is unnecessary, that life should be easy, that the path of least resistance is the smarter choice. That's the trap. It's how people end up stuck, unfulfilled, and wondering why they never reach their potential. They bought into the lie that comfort equals happiness. But real fulfillment, it doesn't come from avoiding pain. It comes from overcoming it. It comes from knowing you stood toe-to-toe with your suffering and refused to back down. Pain is also the great equalizer. It doesn't care where you come from, what you look like, or what resources you have. It will find you. But how you respond to it, that's what separates the strong from the weak. Some people let pain define them. They wear it like a scar, using it as an excuse for why they can't move forward. But others, they take that pain and forge it into something powerful. They let it fuel them. Every setback becomes a reason to go harder. Every failure becomes a lesson. Every ounce of suffering becomes a reminder that they're capable of enduring far more than they thought. And here's the thing. Pain isn't a one-time visitor. It will come back again and again, testing you in new ways. Every level you reach will bring new challenges. The pressure will increase, the expectations will grow, and the pain will be right there waiting. But the difference is, by then you'll be ready. You'll have built the kind of resilience that most people only dream of. You'll know what it means to endure, to suffer, and to keep going. Pain also has a way of exposing the truth about people. When everything's easy, it's simple to pretend to be strong. But when life hits hard, the facade crumbles. That's when you find out who you really are. Do you fold or do you fight? Do you make excuses or do you own your circumstances? Pain doesn't care about your past wins or how many people think you're tough. It demands proof. And every time you stand your ground, you earn that proof. It's also worth remembering that pain isn't just a teacher, it's a privilege. The fact that you get to feel pain means you're alive. It means you have an opportunity to grow, to adapt, to become something greater than you were yesterday. People often waste that opportunity, treating pain like a curse instead of a gift. But those who understand its value, they embrace it. They know that every ounce of pain is shaping them into the person they're meant to be. There's no escaping it. Pain will find you, no matter how carefully you try to avoid it. But when it does, you'll know what to do. You'll face it head on, not because it's easy, but because you know what's waiting on the other side. Growth, strength, clarity, and the unshakable knowledge that no matter what life throws at you, you have what it takes to endure.